Hi there. Tonight we're stepping back in time, way back, to a land where colossal pyramids pierced the sky and a river, teeming with life and occasional grumpy crocodiles, dictated everything. Imagine the scorching sun on your skin, the smell of damp earth after the Nile's annual embrace, and the distant sounds of chisels on stone. You're about to immerse yourself in the daily rhythms of ancient Egypt, a place where life was, well, profoundly different. You might find yourself navigating bustling markets, dodging donkeys laden with grain, or even trying to decipher a hieroglyphic grocery list. Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive a week without a serious culture shock, especially if you're not a fan of mud brick housing or a diet heavily reliant on beer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere exotic, feel anecdotal to drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where these sleepy historical journeys take us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on the banks of the mighty Nile, the lifeblood of this ancient civilization. The air is thick with the scent of water, dust, and something vaguely agricultural, perhaps. The distant aroma of baking bread or fermenting grain. It's early morning, and the sun is just beginning to paint the sky with hues of orange and pink, casting long, lazy shadows across the landscape. Around you, life is stirring with a purpose that feels both ancient and eternally present. You see figures already at work, some guiding oxen through newly tilled fields, their movements slow and rhythmic, others preparing small, papyrus reed boats for a trip downriver, perhaps to trade or fish. Your first impression is one of immense, unhurried purpose, a world operating on a cycle as old as time itself. Everything here, from the grand temples in the distance, their towering pylons hinting at the power they represent, to the humble mud brick hut beside you, seems to operate on a different scale of time, dictated by the relentless, yet utterly predictable, cycles of the Nile. This river, you quickly realize, isn't just a geographical feature. It's a deity, a provider, a highway, and a calendar all rolled into one. Without its annual flooding, which deposits rich, fertile black silt onto the surrounding plains, the land, normally a parched desert, simply wouldn't yield the crops necessary to sustain life. You might feel a gentle breeze, carrying whispers of history from the reeds along the riverbank, a soft rustle that could almost be the voices of millennia past. This isn't a quick tourist stop, a whirlwind visit to admire ancient ruins. This is your new reality, at least for the next few hours, and you're about to experience the practicalities of living in such a vital landscape. Life here, even in its most basic form, is remarkably organized. Think of it less as a chaotic, primitive existence and more as a well-oiled, albeit ancient, machine. This machine is powered by sun, water, and an awful lot of human effort, but there's a certain peaceful rhythm to it, a gentle hum of collective activity that's surprisingly soothing. You'll notice how people move with a quiet efficiency, accustomed to the demands of their environment. Children are already playing near the water's edge, their laughter a bright counterpoint to the more serious work of the adults. You might even spot a heron wading elegantly in the shallows, its patience a reflection of the slow, deliberate pace of life here. It's a society built on tradition and deeply held beliefs. The pyramids you glimpsed earlier aren't just grand tombs. are monumental expressions of faith, testaments to a profound belief in the afterlife and the power of their rulers. Every aspect of daily life, from planting crops to building homes, is interwoven with religious rituals and beliefs in a way that might feel alien to you. Even the most mundane tasks carry a sense of connection to the divine. You'll soon discover that even the seemingly simple act of fetching water from the Nile is part of a larger, interconnected system of life, work, and spirituality. This isn't just a place to observe, it's a place to feel the weight of history, to understand how deeply human lives were shaped by their environment and their beliefs. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians fully understood the complex hydrological cycle of the Nile through scientific observation or simply revered its predictable bounty as a divine miracle, attributing its power solely to the gods. Regardless, their lives were inextricably linked to its ebb and flow, a connection you're about to experience firsthand, a gentle immersion into a world where everything felt deeply meaningful. As you slowly awaken to the rhythms of ancient Egypt, a land brimming with paradoxes and ancient mysteries, you're immediately aware of the supreme authority that governs this land, the pharaoh. He isn't merely a king, a political leader, or a military commander. He is seen as a living god, a direct descendant of the powerful sun god Ra, responsible for maintaining the cosmic order, balance, and justice throughout the entire kingdom. This isn't just a fancy title, it carries immense weight. Imagine the pressure, right? Every single aspect of life, from the essential annual flood of the Nile to the prosperity of the harvests, from the stability of the kingdom to the very rising of the sun each morning, is believed to be under his divine purview. If the crops fail, or if chaos threatens the borders, it's ultimately the pharaoh's cosmic responsibility. You might occasionally catch a distant glimpse of his retinue, a shimmering procession of guards, priests, and officials moving across the desert heat, a tiny speck against the vastness of the landscape. Or perhaps you'll hear the hushed reverence, almost a sacred whisper, in people's voices when his name is spoken, even if it's just a farmer grumbling about the latest royal decree. Your own life, humble as it may be, is intrinsically linked to his existence. His decrees shape your days, dictating when and where you might work, what taxes you might pay, or what festivals you will celebrate. His immense building projects, the awe-inspiring temples and massive tombs that punctuate the landscape, might demand your labor during the flood season, when the fields are submerged and agricultural work is impossible. And perhaps most profoundly, his very well-being, his divine connection to the gods, is thought to ensure the continued well-being and prosperity of the entire nation. It's a bit like having a cosmic CEO who also happens to be a divine being tasked with keeping the entire universe running smoothly. You wouldn't question his decisions, not just out of fear of temporal punishment, but out of a deep-seated, almost innate belief in his sacred role and his unique connection to the divine. Historians still debate the extent to which the common people genuinely believed in the pharaoh's literal divinity versus a more pragmatic acceptance of a stable, powerful, and religiously sanctioned rule. Either way, his image is ubiquitous, inescapable. You see him everywhere, carved into colossal temple walls, his figure towering over mere mortals, painted in vibrant hues on papyrus scrolls, often shown communing directly with the gods, and even adorning the tiny amulets and charms people wear for protection, hoping to harness a sliver of his divine power. Consider the sheer scale of his influence, both spiritual and practical. Every parcel of land, every single resource, every grain of sand, technically belongs to the pharaoh. He's the ultimate landlord, the chief priest of every temple, and the supreme commander of the army, able to raise vast forces for defense or conquest. He embodies the entire nation, not just as a figurehead, but as its living heart and soul, which sounds utterly exhausting, even for a god. His days are a whirlwind of elaborate religious ceremonies designed to appease the gods and maintain Mat. Endless administrative duties overseeing a vast and complex bureaucracy, and, occasionally, leading his armies on military campaigns to protect Egypt's borders or expand its influence. He's certainly not lounging around in a Speedo by the palace pool, if such a luxurious and anachronistic thing even existed. And while his life is undoubtedly one of unimaginable luxury, power, and privilege, it's also one of immense, unceasing responsibility. You might chuckle at the thought of a god-king having a bad hair day, perhaps waking up with his royal wig askew, but even divine beings probably had their off moments. The weight of an entire civilization resting squarely on your shoulders. That's heavier than any pyramid block, heavier than all the gold in his treasury. Perhaps he needed an extra strong cup of beer, the thick, nutritious kind that was a staple of the Egyptian diet, to get through some particularly demanding mornings. Just like us, only his beer was likely brewed specially in the palace kitchens. The most peculiar and fascinating thing about this divine ruler is the very human aspect of succession. While considered divine, pharaohs still had earthly families, and the purity of the lineage was absolutely crucial to maintaining their legitimacy. You might wonder how they managed to keep the living god mystique going when everyone knew he had a mum and dad, perhaps even siblings who occasionally squabbled over trivial things in the palace, much like any other family. It's a testament to the enduring power of belief, the careful crafting of royal propaganda, and the deeply ingrained social order that ensured continuity and stability. You'd see images of him smiting Egypt's enemies with a single blow or communing intimately with powerful deities, always depicted in a powerful, idealized, and eternally youthful form, reinforcing his sacred status and his unchallenged authority. It's a complex system, blending the divine and the mundane, that for millennia provided remarkable stability and cohesion to this ancient land, allowing it to flourish against the sands of time. With the pharaoh firmly established as the divine pinnacle of this society, your gaze now shifts slightly downward, though no less importantly, to the vast machinery that keeps his kingdom running smoothly, the vizier and bureaucracy. Think of the vizier as the pharaoh's right-hand man, the absolute chief minister, wielding immense power second only to the living God himself. This isn't a job for the faint of heart or the easily flustered. It's the ultimate multitasking role. The vizier is essentially the prime minister, chief justice, chief treasurer, and often the head of all public works, including those massive pyramid and temple projects that occasionally require your labor. He's the one who makes sure the Nile flood data is meticulously recorded, that taxes are collected, and you'll certainly be familiar with those, that justice is administered, and that every single royal decree is carried out to the letter. Imagine the sheer volume of papyrus this man must deal with daily. He's probably drowning in paperwork, even in ancient Egypt. Perhaps he had a special scribe whose sole job was to fan him while he read endless reports about grain yields and quarry stone deliveries. Historians still argue about the exact division of power between some viziers and exceptionally strong pharaohs, particularly during periods of regency or less assertive rulers. But generally, the vizier was the operational brain of the kingdom, Beneath the vizier stretches an incredibly intricate and far-reaching bureaucracy, a network of scribes, overseers, and officials that reaches into every corner of the land, touching almost every aspect of your daily life, from the moment you plant your first seed to the day you pay your annual tribute of grain. There's an official somewhere logging it, measuring it, or taxing it. These aren't just dusty old men shuffling papers. They are the gears of the Egyptian state, ensuring that resources are allocated, projects are completed, and order is maintained. You might encounter a local scribe visiting your village to record the harvest, or an overseer checking on the progress of a canal repair. Their presence is constant, a subtle hum in the background of your existence. This system, though seemingly oppressive in its omnipresence, actually provided a remarkable degree of stability and predictability. You knew what was expected of you, and you knew who to appeal to, though success in appeals varied greatly, of course. It's a bit like living in a society with very organized, very ancient tax collectors who also manage the public infrastructure and occasionally adjudicate disputes over, say, a missing goat. You might grumble about the paperwork, but you'd appreciate that the canals were dug on time, and that there was a system in place to resolve conflicts. One quirky tidbit about this bureaucracy is the sheer number of specialized titles. You wouldn't just be a scribe. You might be the scribe of the king's documents, or the overseer of the granaries of Upper and Lower Egypt, or even the controller of the two thrones. It suggests a level of administrative detail that would make modern bureaucrats nod in weary recognition. Imagine having to print business cards for all those titles. It paints a picture of a society that valued order and record-keeping above almost everything else, a passion for lists and tallies that bordered on obsessive. It's certainly a far cry from a freewheeling, disorganized frontier. Every aspect of life, it seems, was carefully catalogued and managed, ensuring the pharaoh's divine rule translated into practical control across the vast stretches of the Nile Valley. You're part of a grand, ancient machine, and the vizier is its chief engineer. Having grasped the immense power of the pharaoh and the intricate web of the vizier's bureaucracy, your attention now turns to another pillar of ancient Egyptian society, the priests and temple life, in a land where gods permeated every aspect of existence. The priests were not just spiritual guides, they were crucial custodians of cosmic order, performing daily rituals that were believed to sustain the universe itself. Imagine being part of a profession where your morning routine literally involved waking up a god, or at least their cult statue, dressing it, feeding it offerings, and parading it around. Sounds like a very high-stakes babysitting job, doesn't it? You might observe a local temple, perhaps a smaller one dedicated to a regional deity, bustling with activity. It's not just a place of worship, it's also an economic powerhouse, often owning vast tracts of land, employing numerous people, and maintaining workshops for artisans. So, a priest's day wasn't just about chanting and incense. They were managers, administrators, and scholars. They controlled tremendous wealth and resources, which sometimes led to considerable political influence. Historians still argue about the precise balance of power between the priesthood and the pharaoh, particularly during certain dynasties when temple complexes grew extraordinarily wealthy and influential. Your local priest, though not as grand as the high priest of Amun at Karnak, still commands respect. You'd approach him for guidance, for interpretations of omens, or perhaps to commission a special prayer or offering. He would likely be clean-shaven, perhaps even bald, to maintain ritual purity and clad in simple white linen robes, no fancy garments for daily duties, though for grand festivals, they'd pull out all the stops, leopard skins, intricate jewelry, and elaborate headwear. You might even catch a glimpse of some of the daily rituals: the opening of the shrine, the washing, an anointing of the cult statue, the offering of food and drink, and then the resealing of the shrine until the next cycle. It's a precise, methodical process, performed with utmost solemnity, believed to ensure the sun would rise again and the Nile would flood. Beyond the grand ceremonies, priests had many practical roles. They were often the keepers of knowledge, studying astronomy to predict the Nile's flood, medicine to heal the sick, and hieroglyphs to record history and religious texts. Many temples also housed extensive libraries, filled with papyrus scrolls containing everything from medical treatises to magical spells. You might think of them as the librarians, doctors, and meteorologists of ancient Egypt, all rolled into one sacred package. It wasn't exactly a 9-to-5 job, and the stakes were pretty high. If you messed up a ritual, you might upset a god, which was generally considered a bad career move. And then there's the peculiar role of animal cults. Imagine a priest whose primary duty is to care for a sacred cat, or a crocodile, or even a beetle. These aren't just pets, they're believed to be living manifestations of deities. So, alongside the grand temples to Osiris and Isis, you'd find smaller sanctuaries dedicated to sacred animals, meticulously cared for by specialized priests. It sounds utterly bizarre to modern ears, doesn't it? Sorry, can't make it to the meeting. Gotta feed the sacred baboon its ritual fruit. But for the ancient Egyptians, it was a perfectly logical extension of their pervasive polytheistic beliefs. The temple life, with its blend of spiritual devotion, economic power, and scholarly pursuit, was a cornerstone of the society you now inhabit, a constant reminder of the God's presence in every breath you take and every crop you harvest. Having grasped the immense power of the pharaoh and the intricate web of the vizier's bureaucracy, your attention now turns to another pillar of ancient Egyptian society, the priests and temple life, in a land where gods permeated every aspect of existence. The priests were not just spiritual guides, they were crucial custodians of cosmic order, performing daily rituals that were believed to sustain the universe itself. Imagine being part of a profession where your morning routine literally involved waking up a god, or at least their cult statue, dressing it, feeding it offerings, and parading it around. Sounds like a very high-stakes babysitting job, doesn't it? You might observe a local temple, perhaps a smaller one dedicated to a regional deity, bustling with activity. It's not just a place of worship, it's also an economic powerhouse, often owning vast tracts of land, employing numerous people, and maintaining workshops for artisans. So, a priest's day wasn't just about chanting and incense. They were managers, administrators, and scholars. They controlled tremendous wealth and resources, which sometimes led to considerable political influence. Historians still argue about the precise balance of power between the priesthood and the pharaoh, particularly during certain dynasties when temple complexes grew extraordinarily wealthy and influential. Your local priest, though not as grand as the high priest of Ammon at Karnak, still commands respect. You'd approach him for guidance, for interpretations of omens, or perhaps to commission a special prayer or offering. He would likely be clean-shaven, perhaps even bald, to maintain ritual purity, and clad in simple white linen robes. No fancy garments for daily duties, though for grand festivals, they'd pull out all the stops, leopard skins, intricate jewelry, and elaborate headwear. You might even catch a glimpse of some of the daily rituals: the opening of the shrine, the washing, an anointing of the cult statue, the offering of food and drink, and then the resealing of the shrine until the next cycle. It's a precise, methodical process, performed with utmost solemnity, believed to ensure the sun would rise again and the Nile would flood. Beyond the grand ceremonies, priests had many practical roles. They were often the keepers of knowledge, studying astronomy to predict the Nile's flood, medicine to heal the sick, and hieroglyphs to record history and religious texts. Many temples also housed extensive libraries filled with papyrus scrolls containing everything from medical treatises to magical spells. You might think of them as the librarians, doctors, and meteorologists of ancient Egypt, all rolled into one sacred package. It wasn't exactly a 9-to-5 job, and the stakes were pretty high. If you messed up a ritual, you might upset a god, which was generally considered a bad career move. And then there's the peculiar role of animal cults. Imagine a priest whose primary duty is to care for a sacred cat, or a crocodile, or even a beetle. These aren't just pets. They're believed to be living manifestations of deities. So, alongside the grand temples to Osiris and Isis, you'd find smaller sanctuaries dedicated to sacred animals, meticulously cared for by specialized priests. It sounds utterly bizarre to modern ears, doesn't it? Sorry, can't make it to the meeting, gotta feed the sacred baboon its ritual fruit. But for the ancient Egyptians, it was a perfectly logical extension of their pervasive polytheistic beliefs. The temple life, with its blend of spiritual devotion, economic power, and scholarly pursuit, was a cornerstone of the society you now inhabit. A constant reminder of the God's presence in every breath you take and every crop you harvest. From the hushed solemnity of the temples, your journey through ancient Egyptian society now leads you to the more glittering, yet equally demanding, lives of the nobles' privileged existence. These are the elite, the landowning aristocrats, often related to the pharaoh or serving as high-ranking government officials. While not divine like the pharaoh, they certainly enjoyed a life of immense luxury, far removed from your daily toil in the fields. Imagine waking up in a grand villa, surrounded by lush gardens, complete with its own private pool, or at least a large, well-tended pond for swimming and cooling off. This isn't just about having nice things. Their wealth and status were crucial for maintaining the social order and administering various regions of the kingdom. You might occasionally see a noble's elegant barge gliding effortlessly down the Nile, draped in colorful fabrics, perhaps with musicians playing soft melodies as they pass. Or you might hear tales of their lavish banquets, where food flows freely and entertainment includes dancers, acrobats, and more musicians. While you're munching on your daily bread and beer, they're feasting on roasted duck, fine wines, and exotic fruits brought from distant lands. It's a stark contrast, but one generally accepted as part of the natural order, sanctioned by the gods and maintained by generations of tradition. Historians still argue about the precise extent of independent power wielded by regional nobles, especially during periods when central pharaonic authority waned. Their loyalty, or lack thereof, could significantly impact the stability of the kingdom. The nobles' responsibilities, however, were not insignificant. They served as regional governors, overseeing agriculture, justice, and the collection of taxes in their territories. They were expected to manage their estates efficiently, ensuring a steady supply of produce and labor for the state. Think of them as the ancient Egyptian version of powerful feudal lords, responsible for maintaining order and productivity in their assigned domains. They sponsored artisans, commissioned elaborate tombs for themselves, often vying for the most impressive, and maintained their own retinues of scribes, servants, and even personal guards. Their estates were self-contained worlds, miniature versions of the larger kingdom, complete with workshops, granaries, and sprawling living quarters. One quirky detail about noble life is their obsession with personal grooming and appearance. Imagine the array of cosmetics, perfumes, and elaborate wigs they'd use daily. Both men and women spent hours on their toilette. They weren't just trying to look good. It was also believed to be a sign of purity and status, pleasing to the gods. You might see a noble gentleman with perfectly kohl-lined eyes and a meticulously braided beard, even if it's a fake one. It certainly put your simple linen tunic and dusty feet to shame. And if you happened to be a servant in a noble household, your days would be filled with preparing these elaborate meals, managing their extensive wardrobes, and keeping their villas sparkling clean, a never-ending task, especially with all that dust from the desert. Their leisure activities were also on a grander scale. While you might enjoy a simple board game, nobles engaged in elaborate hunting expeditions in the marshes for birds, or in the desert for gazelles, or spent long afternoons fishing from their private boats. They had more time for intellectual pursuits, too, commissioning poets and storytellers to entertain them. Their lives were a delicate balance of pleasure, duty, and status, all designed to reflect their elevated position in a society that valued order and hierarchy above all else. For them, life was not just about survival. It was about living elegantly, gloriously, and in a manner befitting those blessed by the gods. Having observed the opulent lives of the nobles, your gaze now narrows to a specific, highly respected, and immensely powerful group within the Egyptian hierarchy, the scribes, the literate elite, in a society where most people, including you, are illiterate. The ability to read and write was not just a skill. It was a pathway to power, prestige, and a life far more comfortable than manual labor. Imagine being one of the rare few who can actually decipher the intricate hieroglyphs, the beautiful yet complex pictorial writing system. You're essentially holding the keys to all knowledge and administration. A scribe's life began with rigorous training, often starting in childhood. Picture a young boy, perhaps not much older than your own children, sitting cross-legged, meticulously copying texts with a reed pen onto papyrus or astraca, pottery shards and limestone flakes used for practice. It was a tough education, involving rote memorization and endless hours of copying, often with a stern teacher wielding a stick for any mistakes. One quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptian scribal texts often complain about the laziness of students, and the difficulty of the profession, sounding remarkably similar to student complaints today. Some things, it seems, never change. Historians still argue about the exact curriculum and the length of a typical scribal education, as detailed records are scarce. Once trained, a scribe had a world of opportunities open to him, and yes, it was almost exclusively men, though there are rare exceptions. They were indispensable in every facet of Egyptian life. They recorded laws, drew up contracts, managed granaries, calculated taxes, kept temple records, wrote official letters, and even composed literary works and religious texts. You'd encounter them at the bustling market, meticulously recording transactions, or in the fields, precisely measuring yields for tax purposes. They were the human databases, the accountants, the lawyers, and the historians of their time. Their work was the backbone of the entire bureaucratic system you just learned about, ensuring that the pharaoh's will was communicated and the kingdom's resources were managed efficiently. Think about the sheer power this gave them. If you wanted something recorded, a contract drawn up, or a letter sent, you needed a scribe. They were the gatekeepers of information, and their profession was highly respected, offering a direct path to upward mobility, a rare commodity in this rigid social structure. A father who managed to get his son into scribal school knew he was securing a better future, a comfortable life away from the back-breaking labor of the fields or quarries. A popular saying among Egyptians was, "Be a scribe, for it saves you from toil." It certainly beat hauling stones for a pyramid. You might see a scribe at work, perhaps seated comfortably, a wooden pallet with cakes of ink beside him, a roll of papyrus unfurled across his lap. His movements would be precise, his focused intense, as he carefully forms each hieroglyph or writes in the more cursive hieratic script used for everyday documents. They were not just record keepers, they were artists in their own right, crafting beautiful texts. They were the intellectual elite, the ones who kept the wheels of civilization turning, quietly, meticulously, and with an authority derived from the pen. Their very existence underscored the value ancient Egyptians placed on order, documentation, and the enduring power of the written word. From the quiet intellectual world of the scribes, your ancient Egyptian journey now shifts to the more boisterous and disciplined realm of the soldiers and military might. While ancient Egypt is often remembered for its monuments and peaceful agricultural life, it also maintained a formidable army, essential for defending its borders, quelling internal unrest, and occasionally expanding its empire. Imagine the sight of disciplined ranks of soldiers, their shields gleaming in the sun, spears held aloft, marching to the rhythmic beat of drums. This was not a conscripted army in the modern sense. It was a professional force, often drawing from various parts of Egyptian society, including foreign mercenaries at times. Your interaction with soldiers might be occasional, but their presence is a constant reminder of the pharaoh's power and the security of the kingdom. You might see them patrolling trade routes, guarding temples or important administrative centers, or perhaps even marching through your village on their way to a distant campaign. Their training was rigorous, starting from a young age, encompassing not just weapons drills, but also physical conditioning and discipline. It was a tough life, demanding obedience and resilience, but it also offered opportunities for advancement and a stable career path for those who excelled. Historians still argue about the precise tactics employed by Egyptian armies in larger-scale battles, as detailed accounts are often idealized and lack specific tactical diagrams. A soldier's daily life, when not on campaign, involved constant training. Picture them practicing with bows and arrows, honing their spear-throwing skills, or engaging in mock combat with wooden shields. They would also participate in parades and ceremonies, showcasing their strength and loyalty to the pharaoh. Their equipment was typically bronze or copper, weapons, spears, axes, swords, and bows, and leather or padded linen shields. Body armor was less common, mostly limited to officers or specific elite units. So, while they looked impressive, they weren't exactly clad in impenetrable steel. You might even see them engaging in friendly wrestling matches or other physical contests to maintain their fitness. A kind of ancient Egyptian Olympics training. One quirky tidbit about Egyptian military life is the role of chariots. While not as numerous as infantry, chariots were the elite fighting force, introduced later in Egyptian history and used with devastating effect. Imagine being a charioteer, standing in a light two-wheeled vehicle, pulled by swift horses, firing arrows into enemy lines. It was the ancient world's equivalent of a tank, fast, powerful, and terrifying. Only the most skilled and privileged soldiers could become charioteers, often drawn from noble families or those who had proven their exceptional bravery and skill. It wasn't just about fighting. It was also about logistics, supplying an army on campaign, especially in the desert, required an incredible feat of organization, ensuring water, food, and equipment reached the front lines. While the life of a soldier involved hardship and danger, it also offered a sense of camaraderie and purpose. They were vital for maintaining Egypt's stability, protecting its precious resources, and ensuring the continued flow of trade and tribute. You might see a grizzled veteran sharing stories by a campfire, or a young recruit eagerly polishing his shield, dreaming of glory. Their discipline and effectiveness were key to Egypt's long periods of peace and prosperity, allowing the rest of society, including you, to go about your daily life with a greater sense of security. They were the muscle of the kingdom, always ready to serve the pharaoh and uphold Mat. Stepping away from the rigid formations of the soldiers, your journey through ancient Egyptian life now leads you into a world of meticulous skill and creative endeavor, the realm of the artisan's craftsmanship. While most of society, including your likely self, is engaged in agriculture, there exists a vibrant and highly specialized class of skilled workers who transform raw materials into objects of beauty and utility. Imagine the gentle tap-tap of a stone carver's hammer, the shimmering glint of gold being hammered into delicate jewelry, or the rhythmic whir of a potter's wheel. These aren't just trades. They're artistic pursuits, often passed down through generations, making them true masters of their crafts. You might encounter these artisans in bustling workshops, often attached to temples, palaces, or the estates of wealthy nobles. These workshops were hive-like environments, filled with the sounds and smells of creation. Perhaps you'd peek into a sculptor's studio, where rough blocks of stone are slowly coaxed into the serene forms of deities or pharaohs. Or maybe you'd walk past a goldsmith's bench, where tiny, intricate pieces of electrum and natural gold-silver alloy are being painstakingly shaped into amulets or adornments for the elite. The sheer patience and precision required for some of these tasks would astound you. They certainly weren't rushing off for a coffee break every hour. Their work demanded absolute focus. Historians still argue about the extent to which artisans had creative freedom versus strictly adhering to established artistic conventions and models provided by their patrons. The range of crafts was astonishingly diverse. There were stonemasons, responsible for quarrying and shaping the immense blocks for pyramids and temples, working with tools that seem impossibly primitive given the monumental results. Then there were carpenters, fashioning everything from elegant furniture for the wealthy to sturdy boats for the Nile. Jewelers created stunning necklaces, bracelets, and rings, often incorporating semi-precious stones like lapis lazuli and turquoise. Potters shaped clay into functional vessels for storing grain and water, as well as more decorative pieces. And let's not forget the painters, who adorned tomb walls and temple reliefs with vibrant scenes of daily life, religious rituals, and mythological narratives, their colors enduring for millennia. One quirky tidbit about Egyptian artisans is the practice of working in teams, often living in purpose-built villages near major construction sites like Deir el Medina. the village for the workmen who built the Valley of the Kings. These communities were highly organized, with their own scribes, administrators, and even a form of workers' rights, including sick leave and regular days off, a concept that might surprise you given the ancient setting. Imagine a foreman yelling, "All right, everyone, time for our ancient Egyptian work-life balance." It really puts into perspective the sophistication of their social organization. While their lives were more physically demanding than a scribe's, they were far more comfortable than a farmer's. Artisans were generally well fed, housed, and respected for their specialized skills. Their contribution was vital to the society, creating not just beautiful objects, but also the very symbols of Egyptian power and piety that defined the civilization. Every statue, every piece of jewelry, every painted wall tells a story, not just of the pharaohs and gods, but of the nameless, dedicated hands that crafted them. You might see a tired but proud potter admiring his freshly fired pot, knowing his skill brings beauty and function to someone's home. Their legacy isn't just in the gold and stone, it's in the enduring artistry that still captivates us thousands of years later. Shifting your perspective from the workshops to the bustling thoroughfares, you now enter the vibrant, sometimes chaotic, world of the merchants and trade routes. While not as highly ranked as priests or nobles, merchants played a crucial role in connecting Egypt with the wider ancient world, bringing in exotic goods and distributing local produce. Imagine the cacophony of a busy market, the shouts of vendors, the haggling over prices, the smell of spices mingling with the dust and the scent of the Nile. This wasn't a static, isolated society. It was intricately linked by networks of trade, both within its borders and far beyond. Your exposure to merchants might be daily, whether buying a simple fish from a local vendor or seeing a grand caravan arrive from distant lands. Trade occurred on various scales. Locally, farmers would bring their surplus crops to market, exchanging them for tools, pottery, or other necessities. This often involved bartering, as coinage wasn't widely used until much later in Egyptian history. So, if you wanted a new hoe, you might need to trade a basket of dates or a few measures of barley. It sounds like a fun challenge, doesn't it? I'll give you 3 chickens for that really good linen tunic, but only if it's not too faded. Historians still argue about the exact economic systems at play, debating whether it was a true market economy or more of a state-controlled distribution system on a larger scale. Egyptian merchants undertook perilous journeys by land and sea, venturing into Nubia for gold, ivory, and exotic animals, to punt possibly modern-day Eritrea or Somalia for frankincense, myrrh, and rare woods, and to the Near East for timber, copper, and tin. These expeditions were often state-sponsored, highlighting their importance to the pharaoh's wealth and power. Imagine the courage it would take to sail unknown waters or trek across vast deserts, facing bandits, harsh weather, and unfamiliar cultures. It certainly makes your trip to the local market feel like a leisurely stroll. These merchants weren't just bringing luxury goods for the elite. They also facilitated the exchange of everyday items and, crucially, ideas and technologies. New agricultural techniques, architectural styles, and even religious concepts could travel along these ancient highways of commerce. You might see a weary merchant, his face tanned by the sun, supervising the unloading of a camel caravan laden with goods from distant lands, the air filled with the exotic aromas of foreign spices you've never encountered before. One quirky tidbit about Egyptian trade is their occasional use of silent bartering in some regions, particularly with less familiar groups. Imagine leaving your goods at a designated spot, retreating, and waiting for the other party to leave their proposed payment. If you liked it, you took it. If not, you left it for them to adjust. It's a trust-based system that seems almost too polite for the rough-and-tumble world of commerce. The sheer resourcefulness involved in ancient trade, without modern maps, communication, or banking systems, is truly remarkable. These merchants were the arteries of the ancient world, circulating not just goods, but also the very lifeblood of cultural exchange, ensuring that ancient Egypt remained connected and vibrant, far from an isolated desert kingdom. After exploring the various layers of the Egyptian hierarchy, from the divine pharaoh to the adventurous merchants, we now arrive at the foundation of it all, the farmer's simple sustenance. This is likely where you, the imagined inhabitant of ancient Egypt, would spend the vast majority of your days. Most of the population were farmers, and their lives revolved entirely around the rhythm of the Nile and the fertility of the black land it bestowed. Imagine the feeling of soft, rich mud squishing between your toes as you work the fields, or the satisfaction of seeing young shoots of wheat emerging from the dark earth. Your daily existence is one of hard work, but also one of deep connection to the land and its ancient cycles. Life for a farmer was dictated by 3 main seasons, all tied to the Nile. First, there was Akit, the inundation, from roughly July to October. This was the time when the Nile flooded, covering the fields with its life-giving silt. During this period, you couldn't farm, so you might be drafted to work on the pharaoh's grand building projects, the pyramids, temples, and irrigation canals. It was a time of communal labor, away from your fields, but crucial for the kingdom. You might have mixed feelings about it, perhaps enjoying the change of scenery, but also yearning to get back to your own plot. Historians still argue about the exact level of coercion versus voluntary participation in these large-scale state projects. After the floodwaters receded, usually by October or November, came Pare, the growing season. This was your busiest time. You'd be out in the fields, preparing the soil, sowing seeds of wheat, barley, and flax. You'd use simple tools, a wooden plow, perhaps pulled by oxen, and hose for weeding. Your days would be long, from sunrise to sunset, under the ever-present Egyptian sun. You'd rely on simple irrigation channels to bring water from the Nile to your fields, if they weren't directly inundated. Imagine the endless bending, the steady rhythm of planting, the constant vigilance against pests or birds trying to snatch your precious seeds. It was a monotonous but essential task, directly linked to your family's survival. Finally, from March to July, came Shemu, the harvest season. This was the reward for all your labor. You'd gather your crops, thresh the grain to separate it from the chaff, and store it in granaries. This was also when tax collectors, those omnipresent agents of the vizier's bureaucracy, would arrive to claim the pharaoh's share. Your payment would often be a portion of your own produce, a system. That sounds quaint now, but was how wealth circulated. You'd keep enough for your family to live on, save some for the next planting, and the rest went to the state or the temple. One quirky detail about ancient Egyptian farming is their use of shadoofs, simple counterweighted levers used to lift water from the Nile or canals into higher irrigation ditches. Imagine spending hours pulling down on a lever, lifting a bucket of water, emptying it, and repeating the process, all under the blazing sun. It was an ingenious but back-breaking invention. While your life was undeniably hard, it also offered a deep sense of purpose and connection to the land that sustained you. Your family, your community, and the entire civilization depended on your sweat and toil. Without you, the farmer, the grand temples would never be built. The scribes would have no grain to record, and the pharaoh would have no empire to rule. Your simple sustenance was, in fact, the very bedrock of ancient Egypt. Having spent your days toiling in the fields, your thoughts naturally turned to your refuge, your mud-brick homes. For the vast majority of ancient Egyptians, including yourself, home was a simple, practical structure built from the most abundant material available mud from the Nile. Imagine the satisfying, cool embrace of thick mud-brick walls after a long, sweltering day under the Egyptian sun. These weren't grand palaces, but they were remarkably effective at providing shelter and comfort in this climate. Your house would likely be modest, perhaps 1 or 2 stories, typically clustered with other homes in a village or town near the fertile banks of the Nile. The construction process was surprisingly straightforward. You'd mix Nile mud with straw, the straw acting as a binder, much like rebar in modern concrete, then shape it into bricks and leave them to dry in the sun. No kilns required, just good old solar power. These sun-dried bricks were then stacked, often without mortar, relying on their sheer weight and the plastering of more mud to hold them together. The roof would typically be flat, made of palm logs, covered with mud and reeds, often used for sleeping on during hot summer nights or for storing goods. Sounds like a giant, very sturdy mud pie, doesn't it? Historians still debate the precise construction techniques used for multi-story mud brick dwellings, as archaeological evidence can be fragmented. Inside your home would be simple but functional. There might be an entrance area, perhaps a small courtyard leading into a main living space. Windows were typically small and placed high up to keep out the harsh sun and dust, and often covered with a simple reed mat rather than glass. This design helped keep the interior surprisingly cool. During the day, acting as a natural air conditioner, furnishings would be minimal. Reed mats on the floor for sleeping and sitting, low wooden stools, perhaps a simple wooden chest for storage, and pottery jars for water and food. No plush sofas or giant flat-screen TVs here, obviously. You might have a small, raised platform for sleeping, keeping you off the cool ground. The kitchen, if you could call it that, would likely be an outdoor or semi-outdoor area to minimize heat and smoke indoors. You'd have a simple clay oven or brazier for baking bread and cooking stews. The air would often carry the faint, comforting smell of wood smoke and baking grain. You might see your family preparing meals, grinding grain with a hand mill, a laborious task that would make you appreciate modern flour. Water would be fetched daily from the Nile, carried in large jars on heads or shoulders, a constant ritual of daily life. One quirky tidbit: some Egyptian homes had rudimentary ventilation systems, sometimes involving a roof vent or a simple wind catcher to direct cooler breezes into the living spaces. It shows an ingenious understanding of passive cooling, far more sophisticated than just a hole in the wall. While your mud brick home might seem primitive, it was perfectly adapted to the climate and the resources available, a testament to the practical ingenuity of ancient Egyptians. It provided a quiet, cool sanctuary from the demanding outside world, a place where your family gathered, ate, and found rest, ready to face another sun-drenched day. Having settled into the imagined comfort of your mud brick home, your thoughts inevitably drift to the most immediate of concerns: your daily diet and beer. For you, an ordinary ancient Egyptian, your meals were simple, repetitive, yet incredibly nourishing, ensuring you had the energy for your demanding days. Forget elaborate multi-course dinners. Your diet was practical, efficient, and deeply rooted in the agricultural bounty of the Nile, the absolute staple of your diet. The undisputed king of ancient Egyptian meals was bread. Imagine the comforting smell of freshly baked bread, warm and earthy, filling the air. You'd eat it with every meal, often using it to scoop up other foods. This wasn't the light, airy bread you might know. It was a coarser, denser loaf, often made from immer wheat or barley. Preparing it was a daily ritual for the women of the household, involving grinding grain with a heavy hand mill, a truly back-breaking task that would make you grateful for modern kitchen appliances. Historians still argue about the precise methods of leavening, debating whether wild yeasts were deliberately cultivated or simply allowed to ferment naturally. Accompanying your bread, and arguably just as important, was beer. Yes, beer, but not the kind you might grab from a refrigerator today. Ancient Egyptian beer was thick, nutritious, and cloudy, more like a liquid bread or a hearty porridge than a recreational beverage. It was low in alcohol, rich in calories, and a safe alternative to often contaminated river water. Everyone drank it, men, women, and children. Imagine waking up and having a pint of nutritious beer for breakfast. It sounds utterly bizarre, but it was a central part of their daily caloric intake. It was so important that workers were often paid in rations of bread and beer. So, if your boss offered you a buyer bonus, it literally meant your sustenance for the day. Your diet would also include a variety of vegetables, onions, garlic, leeks, lettuce, cucumbers, and legumes like lentils and chickpeas, all grown in the fertile Nile Valley. Fruits were seasonal but enjoyed when available, especially dates, figs, and grapes. Meat was a luxury, rarely consumed by the common person. Perhaps on special festival days, or, if you were particularly lucky, you might have a small portion of fish from the Nile or a bit of poultry. Cows, sheep, and goats were primarily kept for milk, wool, or as sacrificial animals, not usually for daily meat consumption by the masses. Cooking methods were basic: baking in clay ovens, boiling stews in pottery pots over open fires, or roasting foods on skewers. You wouldn't find a microwave or an air fryer, obviously. Meals were communal, often eaten simply sitting on mats on the floor. It was a time for family to gather, to share the day's events, and to enjoy the simple pleasures of sustenance. One quirky tidbit is the prevalence of tooth decay among ancient Egyptians, largely due to the abrasive nature of their bread. Sand and grit from the grinding stones often got mixed into the flour, slowly wearing down their teeth. So, while their diet was nutritious, it came with a built-in dental hazard. Perhaps that's why they had some of the earliest dentists. Daily meals, though lacking in variety by modern standards, were the fuel that powered this mighty civilization, a testament to the ingenuity of living off the land, with bread and beer as your constant, comforting companions. Having imagined your meals of dense bread and nutritious beer, your attention naturally turns to what you'd wear in this ancient sun-drenched land. Linen clothing, comfort. Forget elaborate, restrictive garments. Ancient Egyptian attire, for almost everyone, was primarily made from linen, a fabric perfectly suited for the hot, arid climate. Imagine the soft, breathable feel of lightweight linen against your skin, providing both coverage and comfort. It's the ancient world's equivalent of your favorite comfortable t-shirt, only far more functional in desert heat. For you, a common farmer or artisan, your daily wardrobe would be simple and practical. Men typically wore a shenty, garment wrapped around the waist, varying in length from just above the knee to mid-calf. Women wore a simple sheath dress, or caliceris, which was a long, close-fitting gown that stretched from just below the breasts to the ankles, often held up by two shoulder straps. Children, especially younger ones, often wore nothing at all, particularly in the sweltering heat, until they reached a certain age or found themselves in cooler conditions. No need to worry about fashion trends or complex layering here. Simplicity was key. Historians still debate the precise methods of weaving and processing linen to achieve different textures and qualities. As the ancient techniques are not fully understood, linen was made from the flax plant, which grew abundantly in the fertile Nile Valley. The process of turning flax into fabric was incredibly labor-intensive. Imagine soaking the flax stalks, beating them to separate the fibers, spinning the fibers into thread, and then weaving the thread into cloth on a loom. It sounds like a full-time job before you even get to cutting and sewing. The result, however, was worth it. A strong, durable, and remarkably breathable fabric that helped to wick away sweat and keep the wearer cool. It also dried quickly, which was essential given the hot climate and the need for frequent washing or at least rinsing in the Nile. While the basic design remained simple, variations in quality and fineness of the linen denoted social status. The wealthy, like nobles and priests, would wear exquisitely fine, almost sheer linen that draped beautifully, sometimes pleated with intricate folds. They might also adorn their simple garments with elaborate collars made of beads or stones, and accessorize with wide belts and intricate jewelry. You, however, would likely wear coarser, more practical linen, perhaps a little patched here and there, but perfectly functional for your daily toil. Colors were mostly natural white or off-white, though pigments from minerals could be used too. Dye fabrics, with red, blue, and green being popular for wealthier individuals. Imagine the subtle distinction between your sun-bleached tunic and the crisp, newly laundered white of a temple priest. One quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians generally didn't wear shoes, preferring to go barefoot. On rough terrain or for special occasions, sandals made of papyrus or leather were worn. So your dusty feet would be a common sight, perfectly adapted to the warm earth. This focus on practical, clean, and climate-appropriate attire speaks volumes about Egyptian ingenuity. Their clothing wasn't just about modesty or fashion. It was about survival and comfort in a demanding environment. Your linen garments were your constant companions, simple, elegant in their utility, and a testament to the enduring practical wisdom of this ancient civilization. After the demanding work of the day, whether tilling fields or crafting pottery, your thoughts turn, as any humans would, to leisure and board games. Ancient Egyptians weren't all work and no play. They certainly knew how to relax and enjoy themselves. Imagine the simple pleasure of gathering with friends or family after sunset. The cool evening air a welcome respite, engaging in games or other forms of amusement. It wasn't just about unwinding. Leisure activities also fostered community bonds and provided a much-needed mental break from daily routines. Perhaps the most famous ancient Egyptian pastime was playing Snoot, a board game that has puzzled archaeologists and delight historians. For centuries, imagine a long rectangular board, often beautifully carved, with 30 squares in 3 rows of 10. You'd use pawns or cones as playing pieces, and throw sticks, or sometimes astragali knucklebones, instead of dice to determine your moves, the goal. To move your pieces across the board and off before your opponent. Sounds simple, right? Except the rules are lost to time, and historians still argue about the precise gameplay of sunlit, with various theories proposed by modern scholars. It's a bit like trying to reconstruct the rules of chess from just the board and pieces, but without any instructions. You might see people playing sunlit in tomb paintings, sometimes even pharaohs playing it against unseen opponents, perhaps even the gods themselves, or their own soul in the afterlife. It was more than just a game. It was believed to have religious significance, symbolizing the journey of the soul through the underworld. So, when you're moving your pieces, you're not just trying to win, you're metaphorically navigating the challenges of existence and the afterlife, a friendly game of cosmic destiny, if you will. You might even find a simple sunlit board scratched into the ground near your home, ready for an impromptu match. Beyond board games, Egyptians enjoyed a variety of outdoor activities. The Nile itself provided endless opportunities for recreation. Imagine cooling off after a hot day by swimming in the rivers, refreshing and sometimes crocodile-infested, so watch out. Waters. Or perhaps you'd go canoeing in a small papyrus boat, either for fishing or just for pleasure, gliding silently across the calm surface. Fishing itself could be both a livelihood and a relaxing pastime. Children, of course, had their own games. You'd see them playing with simple toys made of wood or clay, like dolls, animals, or spinning tops. They might run races, wrestle, or play ball games. While formal sports leagues like today didn't exist, physical activity was a natural part of growing up and staying fit. You might hear the happy shouts of kids playing near the riverbank as dusk settles. A timeless sound. One quirky tidbit: some wealthier Egyptians, particularly those with access to large estates, enjoyed hunting and fowling in the marshes, using throw sticks or bows and arrows. It was a sport that combined skill with providing food. But for the elite, it was often more about the thrill of the chase and demonstrating prowess. Imagine a noble showing off his aim by bringing down a bird with a precisely thrown stick. A very ancient form of target practice. These moments of leisure, whether a quiet game of sunlit or a refreshing dip in the Nile, were vital threads in the fabric of daily life, offering respite and connection in a world that, for all its structure, truly understood the value of unwinding. From the quiet intensity of board games, your journey through ancient Egyptian leisure naturally flows into the more communal and expressive realms of music and dance. Ancient Egyptians weren't just about solemn rituals and hard work. They had a profound appreciation for beauty, rhythm, and celebration. Imagine the enchanting sound of a lyre or harp drifting through the evening air, or the rhythmic clapping and joyous laughter accompanying energetic dances. Music and dance were woven into the very fabric of daily life, from grand temple ceremonies to intimate family gatherings. You might encounter musicians and dancers in various settings. At a noble's banquet, you'd see professional entertainers, often women, performing intricate dances to the accompaniment of harps, lutes, flutes, and percussion instruments like tambourines and clappers. These performances weren't just for background ambience. They were a central part of the entertainment, designed to delight and mesmerize. Imagine trying to eat your roasted duck while being captivated by the fluid movements of a dancer, adorned with shimmering jewelry. Historians still argue about the precise scales and melodic structures of ancient Egyptian music, as no written musical notation has survived, leaving us to infer from instruments and artistic depictions. For the common person, like yourself, music, and dance were more informal but equally cherished. You might hear someone playing a simple reed flute or a lute in the village square, perhaps accompanying a spontaneous dance. Festivals, which were frequent and joyous occasions, were prime opportunities for widespread musical expression and communal dancing. Imagine the entire village coming alive, clapping to the beat, singing ancient songs, and moving in unison under the starry desert sky. It was a powerful way to bond with your community and express collective joy. The instruments themselves were diverse. Harps ranged from small, portable ones to colossal arched instruments almost as tall as a person. Lutes, similar to modern guitars, provided melodic lines, while various types of flutes, single or double, offered haunting or lively tunes. Percussion was provided by hand clapping, sistra rattles used in religious ceremonies, and various drums. One quirky tidbit: some ancient Egyptian instruments were believed to have magical or protective qualities. The sistrum, for instance, was often used in rituals to ward off evil and appease the goddess Hathor, the deity of music, dance, and joy. So, it wasn't just about sound. It was about channeling divine energy beyond entertainment. Music and dance played crucial roles in religious rituals. Priests and priestesses would perform sacred dances and chant hymns within the temples, believed to honor the gods and maintain cosmic order. The sounds and movements were meticulously choreographed, a form of active prayer and devotion. Even at funerals, professional mourners would chant and perform ritual dances, believed to aid the deceased's journey to the afterlife. It wasn't just about sad songs. It was about guiding the soul with sound and movement. So, whether you were observing a grand performance in a noble's villa or joining in a spontaneous village celebration, music and dance were omnipresent. They provided comfort, expressed devotion, and most importantly, brought joy and a sense of shared humanity to the demanding lives of the ancient Egyptians. They were the heartbeat of the culture, a constant reminder that even in a world of strict hierarchy and hard work, there was always room for rhythm and revelry. Having explored the joyful sounds of music and dance, your perspective now shifts to a truly fascinating and often surprising aspect of ancient Egyptian society: women's rights and roles. Unlike many other ancient cultures, where women were largely confined to the home and had limited legal standing, women in ancient Egypt enjoyed a remarkable degree of freedom, autonomy, and legal rights. Imagine a society where women could own land, manage businesses, initiate divorces, and even represent themselves in court. It's a far cry from what you might expect from a civilization thousands of years ago, isn't it? For you, if you were a woman in ancient Egypt, your life would certainly involve domestic duties, managing the household, raising children, and preparing food. But your world wouldn't be confined to these tasks. You would have legal equality with men in most respects. You could inherit property, bequeath it, and dispose of it as you wished. You could enter into contracts, serve as a witness in legal cases, and even adopt children. This was exceptionally progressive for the ancient world. You might see a woman managing her own farm, overseeing the harvest, or running a small weaving business in the market. Historians still argue about the practical application of these legal rights for women across all social strata, particularly for the very poorest, but the legal framework itself was undeniably advanced. While formal political offices were largely held by men, there were powerful women who broke through these barriers. Queens like Hatshepsut even ruled as pharaohs, taking on the full regalia and titles of a male king, including a false beard. And then there were priestesses, often of high status, serving in temples and performing important religious rituals. Imagine the sheer strength of character and political acumen required for a woman to ascend to such a position of power in any era, let alone over 3,000 years ago. The concept of marriage was generally based on mutual agreement. Though arranged marriages certainly occurred, especially among the elite, women were not merely property, they were partners in the household. Divorce was also relatively easy to obtain for both men and women, with both parties having rights to property division. If a woman initiated a divorce, she was entitled to receive her dowry back, plus a portion of the marital property, which provided a significant degree of financial security. It certainly wasn't a modern approach to marriage, but it offered more equitable terms than many contemporary societies. One quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptian love poems, many of them written by men, often depict women as strong, independent, and desirable figures, capable of expressing their own desires and emotions. This provides a glimpse into a cultural appreciation for women that extended beyond their roles as wives and mothers. Imagine an ancient Egyptian equivalent of a pop song, praising the wit and charm of a woman, not just her beauty. From the highest queens to the humblest peasant women, ancient Egyptian women played vital and respected roles in their society. They contributed to the economy, maintained the social fabric, and actively participated in the legal and religious life of the kingdom. While their lives were still bound by the norms of their time, their status offered a remarkable degree of agency and protection, making ancient Egypt a surprisingly forward-thinking place for women in the tapestry of early civilizations. From the surprisingly progressive social standing of women, your journey now guides you to the next generation: children's education and play. In ancient Egypt, childhood was a period of learning, play, and gradually assuming responsibilities within the family and community. Imagine the laughter of children playing by the Nile, their days filled with a mix of practical lessons and simple joys. It wasn't a world of structured schooling for everyone, but education was constant, informal, and deeply integrated into daily life. For most children, especially those of farmers and artisans like yourself, education primarily meant learning by doing. Boys would follow their fathers into the fields or workshops, observing and assisting from a young age. They'd learn how to sow seeds, tend to crops, repair tools, or master the intricacies of a craft like pottery or carpentry. Imagine a young boy, barely big enough to hold a hoe, trying to mimic his father's movements in the soft mud of the newly flooded fields, or a girl helping her mother grind grain, her small hands struggling with the heavy millstone. These practical skills were essential for their future livelihoods and were passed down through generations, ensuring the continuity of family trades. Historians still argue about the average age at which children were expected to begin contributing significantly to household labor, as it likely varied based on family needs and social class. Girls, while also learning practical skills from their mothers, everything from cooking and brewing beer to weaving linen and managing the household, were also instructed in the important social graces. They learned how to manage a family, care for children, and uphold the family's reputation. While formal schooling was rare for girls, their domestic education was comprehensive and highly valued, preparing them for their crucial roles within the family unit and, if applicable, in running a family business. For the very small percentage of children, almost exclusively boys, destined for scribal or priestly careers, Formal education was a rigorous and lengthy process, as we touched upon earlier. These boys would attend schools attached to temples or administrative centers, learning to read, write, and calculate. Imagine the endless hours spent copying texts, memorizing hieroglyphs, and practicing arithmetic, often with strict discipline. These were the bright, ambitious few who would become the future administrators and intellectuals of Egypt. Play, however, was universal. Children in ancient Egypt enjoyed many of the same simple pleasures as kids today. You'd see them playing with basic toys made from wood, clay, or bone, dolls with real hair, miniature animals, spinning tops, and even rudimentary board games. They loved outdoor games like running races, wrestling, and ball games. The Nile, again, offered endless opportunities for fun, with children swimming, splashing, and playing hide-and-seek among the reeds. Imagine the sheer delight of a child creating a small mud brick house by the riverbank, mirroring the adult world around them. One quirky tidbit about ancient Egyptian childhood: children often shaved their heads, leaving only a single lock of hair, known as the side lock of youth. This distinctive hairstyle was worn until puberty and was a symbol of their age. Imagine all the bald little heads running around. This era of childhood, though brief by modern standards, was a vital period of growth, learning, and innocent joy, preparing the next generation to step into their roles within the complex and enduring society of ancient Egypt. Building upon the early lessons learned in childhood, your journey now highlights a fundamental aspect of vocational training in ancient Egypt: apprenticeships, learning by doing. For the vast majority of young Egyptians, formal schools, as you understand them, simply didn't exist. Instead, skills were meticulously passed down from one generation to the next through a system of practical, hands-on learning. Imagine a young person, perhaps your own child or a neighbor's, spending years meticulously observing and assisting a master craftsman, slowly absorbing the nuances of a trade. This wasn't just about learning a job. It was about inheriting a legacy. If your family were potters, for example, your child would grow up surrounded by clay, kilners, and the rhythmic whir of the potter's wheel. From a very young age, they would be given small tasks: fetching water, kneading clay, preparing tools. As they grew older, they would graduate to more complex duties, gradually learning how to shape vessels, apply glazes, and manage the firing process. It was a patient, iterative process of observation, imitation, and correction. You wouldn't find a textbook on pottery for beginners in ancient Egypt. Your classroom was the workshop, and your teacher was the master, often your own parent or a close relative. Historians still argue about the typical duration of these apprenticeships, as they likely varied greatly depending on the complexity of the trade and the individual's aptitude. This system applied to virtually every skilled profession: carpenters, stonemasons, jewelers, weavers, even doctors and scribes. While scribal training might involve more theoretical learning in dedicated institutions, a large part of it was still practical apprenticeship under an experienced scribe. Imagine spending years mastering the art of hieroglyphic calligraphy, ensuring every line and curve was perfect. It sounds tedious, but your livelihood depended on it. The benefits of this system were numerous. It ensured that traditional knowledge and techniques were preserved and transmitted with incredible accuracy across millennia. It fostered a deep understanding of materials and processes, as apprentices learned not just what to do, but why certain methods worked best. And it created a strong bond between master and apprentice, often a familial one, ensuring both mentorship and discipline. You wouldn't be paying tuition fees, but you'd be dedicating years of your life, providing labor in exchange for invaluable skills. One quirky tidbit about apprenticeships in some workshops, particularly those attached to temples or royal estates, apprentices might even live on site. Imagine a dormitory filled with aspiring young artisans, their days punctuated by the sounds of hammers, chisels, and the stern but encouraging voices of their masters. It was a complete immersion in the craft, a total dedication that would be foreign to our modern, often fragmented, approaches to learning. While the life of an apprentice could be demanding, filled with repetitive tasks and strict instruction, it was also a path to a respected and often more comfortable life than that of a common laborer. It was the ancient Egyptian way of building expertise, ensuring that the wheels of their complex civilization kept turning, powered by generation after generation of skilled hands and minds. Having glimpsed the various structured roles within ancient Egyptian society, your attention is now drawn to a more complex and often shadowed aspect, the lives of enslaved people. While not as central to their economy as in some other ancient civilizations, slavery did exist in ancient Egypt, and the lives of enslaved individuals varied greatly depending on their origin and duties. Imagine the silent, tireless figures performing tasks you might not notice at first, their presence a subtle undertone to the bustling life around you. This was a nuanced system, far from a single, monolithic experience. Enslaved people in ancient Egypt typically came from several sources. Many were prisoners of war, captured during military campaigns, bringing a diverse range of ethnicities into Egyptian society. Others might have been individuals who fell into debt and were forced into servitude. Or sometimes, tragically, children sold by impoverished families. Unlike the chattel slavery of later periods in some cultures, ancient Egyptian slavery was generally not based on race, and enslaved people were often seen more as indentured servants or property of the state or wealthy individuals. Historians still argue about the precise legal status of enslaved people and the mechanisms by which individuals could gain freedom, as evidence is often indirect or open to interpretation. You might encounter enslaved individuals working in a variety of capacities. Some worked in the royal quarries, toiling in harsh conditions to extract stone for monuments. Others were domestic servants in the homes of nobles and priests, performing tasks like cooking, cleaning, and attending to their master's needs. You might see them in large agricultural estates, working alongside free laborers, or in workshops, assisting artisans. Their work was often demanding, but they were generally provided with food, shelter, and clothing, as they were considered valuable assets. They weren't paid wages in the modern sense, but their basic needs were met. One peculiar aspect was that enslaved individuals sometimes had certain rights. They could own property, marry free Egyptians, and even bear witness in legal proceedings, which is quite remarkable compared to the complete lack of rights for enslaved people in many other historical contexts. While their freedom was restricted, their humanity was not entirely denied. Imagine an enslaved person carefully tending a small garden plot they owned themselves, or a domestic servant haggling at the market for a better price on behalf of their mistress. It paints a picture of a system with more flexibility than you might initially assume. However, it's crucial not to romanticize their situation. Their lives were still defined by forced labor and a lack of true personal autonomy. They could be bought, sold, or inherited. Punishments could be harsh, and their social mobility was severely limited. They were, ultimately property. Yet, their integration into society was complex, and some even rose to positions of trust or gained their freedom. You might see a foreign prisoner of war, once a fierce warrior, now quietly grinding grain in a noble's kitchen, a silent testament to the shifting fortunes of conflict and the diverse tapestry of ancient Egyptian life. Their presence, though sometimes understated, was an undeniable thread in the complex social fabric of this enduring civilization. After navigating the varied human elements of ancient Egypt, your attention is now drawn to the ever-present, pervasive force that shaped almost every decision, every action, and every thought. Religious practices. In ancient Egypt, religion wasn't a separate part of life, it was life. From the moment you woke until you laid your head down at night, the gods were all around you, influencing your world in tangible and intangible ways. Imagine the constant hum of reverence, the subtle rituals you'd perform without a second thought, believing they directly affected your fortune, your harvest, and your very existence. The ancient Egyptians worshipped a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses, each associated with different aspects of nature, human life, and the cosmos. You'd know the major deities like Ra, the sun god, whose journey across the sky marked your day, Osiris, god of the underworld and resurrection, offering hope for an afterlife, and Isis, his devoted wife and goddess of magic and motherhood, to whom you might turn for protection. But there were also countless local deities, animal gods, and household spirits. You might have a small shrine in your own home dedicated to a protective deity. Perhaps Base, the dwarf god, with his comical, often frightening, appearance, believed to ward off evil from your family. Historians still argue about the precise theological coherence of the Egyptian pantheon, debating whether different local cults ever truly formed a unified religious system. Your daily religious practice wouldn't typically involve visiting the grand temples, which were largely reserved for priests and pharaohs. Instead, your devotion would be more personal and informal. You might offer small prayers at dawn, facing the rising sun, acknowledging Ra's life-giving power. You'd leave small offerings at your household shrine, a bit of bread, a flower, or a drop of beer, hoping to gain favor or protection. You'd wear amulets, small charms shaped like the Ankh, the symbol of life, the Eye of Horus for protection and good health, or various gods, believing they held magical power to deflect evil or bring good luck. Imagine wearing a tiny scarab beetle charm, not just as jewelry, but as a genuine belief in its power of rebirth and protection. The rhythms of your agricultural life were deeply intertwined with religious festivals and rituals. The annual inundation of the Nile, so crucial to your livelihood, was celebrated with joyous festivals, acknowledging the gods' benevolence. You'd participate in processions, sing hymns, and offer thanks for the fertile land. Even farming practices had a spiritual dimension, with prayers offered before sowing and harvesting. It wasn't just planting seeds. It was engaging in a sacred act that mirrored the cosmic cycles. Death, far from being an end, was considered a transition to another realm, the duat, or underworld. Your beliefs about the afterlife profoundly influenced your life. You'd aim to live justly, guided by Ma'at, so your heart would be light enough to pass the judgment of Osiris. Funerary rituals, though often elaborate for the wealthy, were important for everyone, ensuring a safe passage to the eternal fields of reeds. You might quietly save what little you could to ensure a proper, even if simple, burial for yourself or your loved ones. A final act of devotion to the journey beyond. One quirky tidbit: the Egyptians sometimes used dream interpretation as a form of divine communication. If you had a troubling dream, you might consult a priest or a dream interpreter to understand its message, believing it was a direct communication from the gods or the deceased. Imagine your local priest telling you that your dream about a giant hippopotamus means you're going to have a really good harvest next year. This constant, all-encompassing presence of the divine made your world feel meaningful, ordered, and deeply spiritual, a stark contrast to a purely secular existence. Building on the pervasive influence of religion in daily life, your ancient Egyptian calendar was punctuated by frequent and vibrant festivals and celebrations. These weren't just days off from work. They were crucial religious events, opportunities for communal gatherings, feasting, and a collective reaffirmation of faith. Imagine the joyous cacophony of a village transformed, the air filled with music, the aroma of special foods, and the excited chatter of people from far and wide. These festivals provided much-needed breaks from the arduous daily grind, fostering a powerful sense of community and shared spiritual experience. The most important festivals were often tied to the cycles of the Nile and the agricultural year. The Wepet Renpet, or the opening of the year, celebrated the Nile's inundation and the start of the new year, often around late summer. This was a time for hopeful prayers for a good flood and a bountiful harvest. Imagine the anticipation as the waters began to rise, followed by joyous processions to the riverbanks, offerings thrown into the swirling currents, and lively music echoing across the fields. It was a massive, collective sigh of relief and a burst of optimism for the year ahead. Historians still argue about the exact calendrical dates of some festivals, as the Egyptian calendar itself evolved over time and local variations existed. Other significant festivals honored specific deities. The Opet festival, for instance, was a grand procession involving the cult statues of Ammon, Mut, and Khonsu from Karnak Temple being transported, usually by river, to Luxor Temple. Imagine the sheer spectacle: massive barges adorned with golden shrines, rowed by dozens of oarsmen, accompanied by priests, soldiers, and throngs of cheering common people lining the banks, eager to catch a glimpse of the gods. For you, it might be a rare chance to see the pharaoh or high priests, and certainly a moment of intense religious fervor and public celebration. There would be feasting, drinking, and general merriment, turning a religious procession into a giant party. Beyond these grand state-sponsored events, local villages and towns had their own smaller festivals celebrating regional gods or important harvest milestones. You might participate in a local procession, carrying small offerings to your community's shrine, followed by a communal meal where food and beer were shared generously. These were opportunities to connect with neighbors, share news, and momentarily forget the worries of daily life. Picture children running freely, playing games, and adults laughing heartily, perhaps indulging a little too much in the communal beer. One quirky tidbit: some festivals involved ritualistic games or even mock battles. Imagine villagers staging a friendly fight with sticks, symbolizing ancient conflicts or the triumph of order over chaos. It's a playful way of reenacting myths and reinforcing cultural narratives, adding a layer of entertainment to the sacred. These celebrations weren't just about passive worship. They were active, immersive experiences that engaged all your senses and strengthened your connection to your gods, your community, and the timeless rhythms of ancient Egypt. They were the vibrant punctuation marks in the narrative of your life, providing moments of joy, unity, and spiritual renewal. Emerging from the lively atmosphere of festivals, your journey through ancient Egypt now delves into a deeply ingrained aspect of daily life: magic and amulets. For the ancient Egyptians, the world was alive with unseen forces, both benevolent and malevolent. Magic wasn't relegated to secret societies or obscure rituals. It was a practical tool, a fundamental part of their belief system, used by everyone, from the pharaoh to the humblest farmer, for protection, healing, and influence. Imagine wearing a small charm, not just as decoration, but with a genuine conviction that it actively shields you from harm. You'd encounter magic in myriad forms. If you were feeling unwell, a physician might combine herbal remedies with magical spells. If your child was restless at night, you might place an amulet near their bed to ward off evil spirits. Every significant event, from childbirth to building a new home, might involve a small protective ritual. It was a holistic approach to life, where the spiritual and physical worlds were inextricably linked. The line between what we consider medicine and magic was often blurred, with both used in tandem. Historians still argue about the precise distinction between formal religious rituals performed by priests and everyday magical practices carried out by ordinary people or folk practitioners. The most common manifestation of this pervasive belief was the widespread use of amulets. These were small objects, worn on the body, placed in homes, or buried with the dead, believed to possess protective or beneficial powers. Imagine choosing your daily amulets as carefully as you might choose your clothes, each one imbued with specific meaning. The ankh, the symbol of life, was incredibly popular, believed to grant vitality and eternal existence. The Eye of Horus, representing protection and good health, was another favorite, often painted on boats or worn as jewelry. The scarab beetle, symbolizing rebirth and the rising sun, was often placed over the heart during mummification, believed to aid the deceased's journey to the afterlife. You might have one sewn into your linen tunic or worn as a pendant around your neck, a constant source of quiet reassurance. Beyond amulets, various magical spells and incantations were used. These weren't necessarily dramatic wand-waving affairs. Often, they involved reciting specific words or phrases, sometimes accompanied by gestures or the application of substances. For instance, if you were bitten by a snake, a local healer might apply a poultice while reciting a protective spell invoking a snake deity. It was a pragmatic approach to problem-solving, adding a spiritual dimension to practical actions. One quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians also believed in the power of magic names. Knowing the true, secret name of a god or demon was believed to give you power over it. This meant that the real names of powerful entities were often hidden, and euphemisms or epithets were used in public to avoid accidentally invoking their power or to prevent malicious use by others. Imagine trying to make sure you only used the nickname of your local river spirit, just in case. This constant interplay of the seen and unseen, the practical and the magical, infused your daily life with a sense of wonder and a perpetual awareness of the powerful forces that shaped your ancient world. Moving from the protective sphere of magic, your journey now brings you to the core unit of ancient Egyptian society: family values and marriage. For the Egyptians, family was paramount, the bedrock of their lives, providing support, continuity, and a sense of belonging in a world that could be demanding. Imagine the warmth of your immediate family gathering in your mud brick home, sharing a meal, or the quiet comfort of kinship extending to your wider clan. The bonds of family were strong, often dictating your profession and social standing. Marriage was a fundamental institution, viewed primarily as a social and economic arrangement rather than solely a romantic one. Though affection certainly played a role, most marriages were arranged by parents, particularly for young people, with the aim of consolidating family wealth, securing alliances, or ensuring the continuation of a family trade. You wouldn't typically be choosing your partner based on a fleeting crush. It was a more practical decision, designed for stability and future prosperity. Imagine your parents discussing potential spouses for you, weighing up their family's reputation, their skills, and their potential contribution to your household. Historians still argue about the precise prevalence of love matches versus purely arranged marriages, as the evidence often comes from idealized texts or legal documents. The age of marriage varied, but girls often married in their early teens, while boys were typically a few years older. Once married, the goal was to establish a new household and, most importantly, to have children. Children were highly valued in ancient Egyptian society, seen as blessings from the gods, and essential for continuing the family line and caring for parents in their old age. Imagine the joy in your village when a new baby was born, a testament to the continuation of life. Barrenness could be a source of great sorrow and, for men, a reason for taking a second wife. Though polygamy was rare among commoners, and usually only practiced by the wealthy elite, while marriage was generally monogamous. For most people, some pharaohs and high-ranking nobles might have multiple wives, often for political alliances or to ensure many heirs. However, there would typically be a great royal wife who held the primary position and whose children were most likely to inherit. You, as a commoner, would expect a single spouse for life, a partner to share the burdens and joys of daily existence. 1. Quirky tidbit about ancient Egyptian marriage customs is the absence of a formal, legally recognized wedding ceremony as we understand it. Instead, marriage was largely a social agreement. A couple would simply start living together, and that was considered the marriage. There might be a celebratory feast, and gifts would be exchanged between families, but no priests or legal officiants were strictly necessary for the union to be recognized. Imagine simply moving your few possessions into your partner's home and suddenly being considered married. This pragmatic approach highlights their focus on the practicalities of household formation, rather than elaborate legal or religious rituals. For the union itself, your family was your closest circle, your support system, and the enduring legacy you hoped to leave behind in the fertile lands of Egypt. From the intimate sphere of family life, your journey now shifts to perhaps the most iconic and enduring aspect of ancient Egyptian belief: mummification and afterlife prep. For the Egyptians, death was not the end, but merely a transition to a glorious eternal existence. A journey through the duat, the underworld, to the field of reeds, a paradise much like their beloved Nile Valley. Imagine the meticulous preparations, the solemn rituals, all undertaken with the profound conviction that they were ensuring a successful rebirth in the afterlife. This wasn't morbid. It was an optimistic, highly practical approach to eternity. While the elaborate mummification process is most famous for pharaohs and nobles, the desire for an afterlife was universal, and even common people like yourself would make provisions for their post-mortem journey, albeit on a much simpler scale. For the wealthy, mummification was a complex, 70-day process. Imagine the specialized embalmers, their hands expertly working on the deceased body, carefully removing internal organs except the heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence. An emotion, drying the body with natron salt, and then meticulously wrapping it in hundreds of yards of linen bandages. Each step was accompanied by prayers and rituals, designed to protect the deceased and transform them into an ark, a transfigured spirit. Historians still argue about the precise chemical composition of some of the resins and oils used in the embalming process, as analysis often reveals complex mixtures. For you, a common farmer, full mummification might be a luxury beyond your means. Instead, your body might be naturally desiccated by the hot desert sand, or simply wrapped in linen and buried in a shallow grave. However, the intention was the same: to preserve the body so the soul, Ka and Ba, had a home to return to in the afterlife. Even a simple burial would include basic grave goods, such as pottery, perhaps a small amulet, and food offerings, believed to sustain the deceased on their journey. It's a comforting thought, isn't it, to believe your loved ones are simply off on a long celestial adventure. The preparations extended beyond the body itself. The deceased would need specific spells and prayers to navigate the dangers of the underworld and pass the judgment of Osiris. These spells were often written on papyrus scrolls, like the famous Book of the Dead, and placed in the tomb, or even inscribed directly onto the coffin or tomb walls. Imagine your surviving family ensuring these vital cheat codes for the afterlife were included in your modest burial. It was their last great act of love and care. One quirky tidbit: the internal organs removed during mummification, lungs, liver, intestines, and stomach, were not discarded. Instead, they were separately mummified and placed in special containers called canopic jars, each jar topped with the head of one of the 4 sons of Horus, who protected that specific organ. Imagine the care taken with these little jars, each one a miniature mummy in itself, ensuring that every part of you was ready for eternity. This meticulous attention to detail, born from a profound belief in life after death, underscores the Egyptian obsession with permanence and their incredible efforts to conquer the ultimate unknown. Your preparations for the afterlife, however, modest, were just as earnest as the pharaohs, a testament to a civilization utterly devoted to eternity. Following the meticulous preparations for the afterlife, your journey through ancient Egypt logically moves to the final resting places themselves, tombs and burial rituals. For the Egyptians, a tomb was more than just a grave. It was a permanent home for the deceased's Ka life force and Ba personality, a gateway to eternity, and a place where the living could interact with the dead through offerings and prayers. Imagine the solemn procession, the quiet dignity of the mourners, as a loved one is laid to rest, not in sorrow, but with a deep sense of purpose for their journey ahead. The scale and grandeur of tombs varied dramatically with social class. For the pharaohs, you'd have the colossal pyramids or the hidden, elaborate rock-cut tombs of the Valley of the Kings, filled with unimaginable treasures and intricate wall paintings depicting their journey through the underworld. Nobles and high officials would commission large, beautifully decorated mastaba tombs or rock-cut chapels, often adorned with scenes of their earthly lives, depicting their wealth, their family, and their service to the state, ensuring their legacy lived on. Imagine standing before such a tomb, admiring the vibrant artwork that tells the story of a life lived millennia ago, a kind of ancient Egyptian biography in stone. Historians still argue about the precise symbolic meaning of every single funerary ritual and offering, as some aspects remain enigmatic. For you, a common farmer or artisan, your tomb would be much simpler, perhaps a shaft grave dug into the desert sand or a small, humble chamber. However, even these modest burials would be carefully prepared. The body, perhaps naturally preserved by the dry desert, would be wrapped in linen, and basic grave goods would be included, pottery jars containing food and drink for the journey, perhaps a simple tool or a beloved personal belonging. These items were not just sentimental, they were believed to be magically activated in the afterlife, serving the deceased's needs. You might also find shabdis, small figurines meant to magically come to life and perform labor for the deceased in the afterlife, sparing them from manual work. It's like having your own miniature, magical workforce ready to go. The burial ritual itself would be a solemn affair. After the body was prepared, it would be transported to the tomb. Priests would perform specific ceremonies, reciting spells and prayers to ensure the deceased's safe passage through the underworld and their successful resurrection. The opening of the mouth ceremony was particularly crucial, believed to restore the deceased's senses, their ability to see, hear, speak, and eat in the afterlife, preparing them for eternal existence. Imagine a priest touching a ritual adze to the mouth of the mummy or the statue, symbolically reanimating it. Offerings were a vital part of the burial tradition and continued after the funeral. Family members would regularly bring food, drink, and flowers to the tomb chapel, believing these offerings would nourish the ka of the deceased. It was a way for the living to maintain a connection with their ancestors, seeking their guidance and blessing. You might see a family quietly leaving a loaf of bread and a jug of beer at a humble grave, a silent act of enduring love and respect. These tombs, from the grandest pyramid to the simplest desert burial, were not just markers of death, but profound statements of faith in life eternal, a testament to the Egyptian belief that even after breath leaves the body, the journey of the soul continues, forever intertwined with the sacred land of the Nile. From the solemnity of tombs and the hope for the afterlife, your journey through ancient Egypt now turns to the very practical and pervasive reality of justice and law. Even in a society deeply rooted in religious belief, a structured legal system was essential for maintaining order, resolving disputes, and upholding the concept of mat, truth, justice, and cosmic balance. Imagine a world where disputes are settled not by brawls in the street, but through a recognized system, however ancient it might seem. At the heart of the Egyptian legal system was the principle of mat, personified by the goddess of truth and justice. Every judgment, every law, was theoretically designed to align with this divine order. The pharaoh was the supreme judge, but in practice, he delegated authority to the vizier, who oversaw the entire judicial system. Beneath the vizier were various courts and local councils. For you, a common villager, most disputes would be handled by a local council of elders or prominent community members, often called a kenbet. Imagine your neighbors gathering to hear a disagreement over land boundaries or a stolen tool, trying to reach a fair verdict based on common sense and traditional law. Historians still argue about the precise extent to which divine law, based on religious texts, influenced everyday legal rulings versus practical case law. The legal process, while lacking formal lawyers or complex statutes as we know them, was surprisingly fair for its time. Both parties in a dispute had the right to present their case, call witnesses, and even bring evidence. Records of court proceedings, found on papyri, show meticulous detail, indicating a strong emphasis on documentation and accountability. Penalties varied based on the crime and social status, ranging from fines, forced labor, and corporal punishment like beatings for lesser offenses, to mutilation or execution for serious crimes like grave robbery or treason. However, capital punishment was relatively rare. You wouldn't want to get caught stealing temple offerings. That was a particularly serious offense. One quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians sometimes used oracles to help resolve legal disputes that couldn't be settled by human judgment alone. Imagine going to a temple where a priest would ask a god's cult statue to choose between two conflicting statements or individuals, with the statue's movements interpreted by the priest, of course indicating the divine will. It's a fascinating blend of legal process and religious belief, adding a layer of supernatural arbitration to earthly conflicts. While corruption certainly existed, as it does in any human system, the ideal of Mat provided a powerful moral compass. The scribes who recorded legal proceedings and the officials who enforced judgments were expected to uphold justice. You might grumble about a particular ruling, but generally you'd trust the system to deliver fairness. The existence of a structured legal framework, even one so ancient, shows a society that valued order, accountability, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. It allowed the vast majority of Egyptians to live their lives with a reasonable expectation of justice, knowing that there was a system in place to protect their rights and address wrongs, keeping the delicate balance of Mat in effect. Moving from the halls of justice, your journey now guides you into a surprisingly sophisticated aspect of ancient Egyptian life: medicine and healing. Far from being purely reliant on magic, though magic certainly played a part, as we discussed, the Egyptians developed a remarkably advanced understanding of anatomy, diagnosis, and treatment for their time. Imagine a skilled physician examining your ailment, not just with incantations, but with practical knowledge gained from centuries of observation and experience. It's a blend of science, superstition, and surprisingly pragmatic care. Ancient Egyptian medicine was highly specialized. You wouldn't just have a doctor. You might have an eye doctor, a dentist, a veterinarian, or a specialist in abdominal diseases. This level of specialization is astonishing for such an ancient civilization. They had a decent understanding of the human body, partly thanks to their meticulous mummification process, which gave them some insight into internal organs, even if their understanding of function was still rudimentary. Imagine a surgeon preparing for an operation not with modern anesthetics, but with keen eyes and steady hands, perhaps with a sip of strong beer for the patient. Historians still argue about the extent to which medical knowledge was systematically taught and disseminated beyond specific lineages of practitioners. Medical texts, like the Edwin Smith papyrus, reveal a pragmatic approach to injuries and diseases. These papyri detail various cases, offering diagnoses, prognoses, predictions of the outcome, and treatments. They describe how to set broken bones, treat wounds, and even perform basic surgical procedures. They understood the connection between hygiene and health, advising cleanliness and good sanitation. You might find a physician recommending a specific herbal poultice for a wound or prescribing a dietary change for an internal ailment. Their pharmacology included a wide array of plant-based remedies, minerals, and even animal products, often mixed into concoctions to be ingested or applied. Pain relief was a consideration, though perhaps not as effective as modern options. Opium, derived from poppies, was known and likely used as a sedative or analgesic. Willow bark, containing compounds similar to aspirin, was also employed for pain and inflammation. So, while you wouldn't expect a shot of Novocaine, there were efforts to alleviate suffering. One quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptian dentists were skilled enough to perform procedures like extracting diseased teeth, draining abscesses, and even crafting rudimentary dental bridges using gold wire to hold loose teeth together. Imagine sitting in a chair, a skilled Egyptian dentist peering into your mouth, perhaps with a very sharp bronze tool, while you clutched a pain-relieving amulet. It certainly makes a modern dental visit seem like a spa day, while their medical practices might seem primitive by today's standards. They represented a significant leap in understanding and care for human health in the ancient world. Their doctors were respected professionals, combining practical knowledge with a deep understanding of the spiritual forces believed to influence well-being, ensuring that even in illness, there was hope for healing and recovery. From the intricate world of ancient Egyptian medicine, your journey now highlights another compelling aspect of their civilization: inventions and innovations. Despite operating with what we consider rudimentary tools, the ancient Egyptians were incredibly inventive, pioneering technologies and ideas that profoundly shaped their own society and laid foundations for future civilizations. Imagine a world where seemingly simple solutions led to monumental achievements, demonstrating a genius born of necessity and keen observation. You might not think of the Egyptians as engineers or scientists in the modern sense, but their daily lives were filled with the results of clever thinking. Take agriculture, for instance. The shadoof, that counterweighted lever system for lifting water you learned about, was an ingenious way to manage irrigation efficiently. They also developed advanced plows and sickles to improve farming yields. These weren't just tools, they were innovations that directly impacted your ability to grow enough food to survive and pay your taxes. Historians still argue about the exact point at which certain inventions, like the potter's wheel, were widely adopted, as their introduction sometimes occurred gradually over centuries beyond agriculture. Consider their impact on construction. The sheer scale and precision of the pyramids and temples speak volumes about their understanding of engineering, surveying, and logistics. They developed techniques for quarrying massive stone blocks, transporting them over vast distances, often by river, and lifting them into place with ramps and levers. Imagine the coordination required for thousands of workers to move a single, multi-ton block of granite without the aid of modern machinery. It's a testament to their organizational skills and their ingenious use of simple mechanical principles. Perhaps you'd see a group of workers using a wooden sled over lubricated ground, pulling a massive statue, a truly ancient heavy operation. They also made significant strides in various other fields. The Egyptians developed a complex calendar system essential for predicting the annual Nile flood and planning agricultural cycles. This calendar, based on the sun and the rising of the star Sirius, was remarkably accurate for its time, influencing later calendars. They were also pioneers in papermaking, transforming the papyrus plant into a durable, flexible writing surface that was far superior to clay tablets, and revolutionized record-keeping. Imagine the difference this made to the scribes, who could now write and store vast amounts of information with relative ease. One quirky tidbit: the ancient Egyptians were among the first to invent and widely use toothpaste. While their version might have contained ingredients like powdered rock salt, mint, dried iris flowers, and pepper, the concept of cleaning teeth with a paste was revolutionary. Imagine rubbing that gritty mixture onto your teeth each morning. Certainly a far cry from your minty fresh modern toothpaste, but a clear sign of their innovative approach to personal hygiene and health. from irrigation tools to dental care, and from monumental architecture to the very paper records of their history. Egyptian innovations were deeply practical and fundamentally shaped the world you inhabit. They were the unsung heroes of applied science, constantly finding clever ways to make life easier, more productive, and certainly more monumental. Having explored the ingenious innovations that shaped ancient Egypt, your journey now brings you back to the most fundamental and utterly indispensable element of their existence: the Nile's enduring importance. This river was far more than just a waterway. It was the sole reason this civilization could flourish in the middle of a vast desert, dictating everything from your daily schedule to the very concept of time itself. Imagine the life-giving waters, a ribbon of vibrant blue winding through the desolate yellow and red of the desert, a constant, comforting presence that literally brought life to the land. For you, a farmer, the Nile was your livelihood, your calendar, and your provider. Your entire year revolved around its annual inundation, a predictable flood that, from July to October, would spread fertile, black silt across the agricultural lands. This rich soil, deposited by the river, replenished the nutrients in the fields, making them incredibly productive year after year without the need for complex fertilization. Without this natural annual gift, agriculture on such a scale would have been impossible. Imagine waiting anxiously for the waters to rise each year, knowing your family's survival depended on its benevolent overflow. Historians still argue about the precise triggers for the Nile's annual flood, as it depended on rainfall in distant Ethiopian highlands, a phenomenon the Egyptians understood in terms of divine will. Beyond providing fertile land, the Nile was the primary transportation artery of ancient Egypt. Imagine watching sleek boats with their distinctive sails gliding up and down the river, carrying everything from massive blocks of stone for temple construction to baskets of grain for trade. It was the ancient world's superhighway, connecting Upper and Lower Egypt, facilitating communication, commerce, and the movement of goods and people. Without the river, unifying such a long, narrow kingdom would have been incredibly difficult, if not impossible. You might use a simple reed boat to cross to the other side, or perhaps join a larger vessel transporting goods to the next market town. The river also supplied essential resources. Its banks were lined with papyrus reeds, crucial for making paper, baskets, and even boats. Fish from its waters provided a vital protein source, supplementing your diet of bread and beer. The very mud of its banks was the material for your humble home. It truly was the source of all life in this ancient land, a benevolent deity in liquid form. One quirky tidbit: the Egyptians worshipped Hapi, the god of the Nile's inundation, depicting him as a portly figure with pendulous breasts, symbolizing the nourishing abundance he brought. Imagine praying to a slightly plump, blue-skinned deity who looks perpetually ready for a good meal, all because he brought the crucial floodwaters. This reverence highlights just how deeply ingrained the river's importance was in their psyche. The Nile shaped their landscape, their economy, their social structure, and their very spiritual beliefs, an enduring testament to the power of geography and the profound wisdom of a people who learned to live in perfect harmony with the pulse of their environment. Your life, your community, your entire civilization was a gift from the Nile, a constant reminder of its unparalleled and enduring importance. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long, purple shadows across the timeless desert landscape, your immersive journey through ancient Egypt approaches its gentle conclusion. We've explored the pharaoh's divine rule, the meticulous bureaucracy, the sacred lives of priests, and the luxurious world of nobles. We've seen the scribes, the soldiers, and the skilled artisans, each playing their part in this intricate tapestry. You've lived, in a sense, as a farmer, understanding the bedrock of this civilization, residing in mud-brick homes, sustained by simple bread and beer, and clad in comfortable linen. You've experienced their leisure, their family values, the deep permeation of religion, magic, and their ingenious inventions. And, most profoundly, you felt the omnipresent pulse of the Nile, the very artery of this enduring civilization. This legacy and enduring mystery of ancient Egypt continues to captivate us. Thousands of years after its decline, imagine the sheer tenacity of a civilization that thrived for nearly 3,000 years, a span of time almost incomprehensible to our modern minds. Their achievements, the pyramids that defy gravity and time, the intricate hieroglyphs that still tell stories, the medical knowledge that hints at surprising sophistication, the artistic conventions that remained largely unchanged for millennia, all speak to a remarkable stability and cultural consistency. They mastered their environment, developed complex social structures, and created a rich spiritual world that profoundly influenced their every waking moment and their hopes for eternity. Historians still argue about the precise reasons for the ultimate decline of ancient Egypt, citing a combination of internal strife, external invasions, and environmental changes. Yet, for all we know, ancient Egypt still holds countless secrets. There are still undiscovered tombs beneath the sands, unread papyri awaiting decipherment, and layers of daily life yet to be fully understood. Think of the untold stories of individuals like you, the common people whose lives, though unrecorded, in grand monuments, formed the vast majority of this incredible society. What were their dreams, their everyday worries, their small triumphs and heartbreaks? The whispers of their existence echo across time, reminding us that history isn't just about kings and battles, but about the millions of ordinary lives lived under extraordinary circumstances. One quirky tidbit: despite their advanced civilization, there are very few records or direct descriptions of what the ancient Egyptians actually sounded like when they spoke. We can reconstruct their language, but the nuances of accent, intonation, and daily conversational rhythm remain largely a mystery. Imagine finally hearing an ancient Egyptian say good morning. It would be a linguistic time machine there. Enduring appeal lies not just in what we know, but in the tantalizing unknowns, the pieces of the puzzle that still await discovery. They left behind a legacy of monumental art, profound religious belief, and practical innovation that continues to inspire awe and spark endless curiosity. As the last embers of our historical journey fade, consider the deep, calming silence of the desert night, the very same silence that has enveloped these ancient lands for millennia. Holding their stories close, the desert night has truly settled, now quiet and vast, just as it has for thousands upon thousands of years. The stars overhead, those same constellations the ancient Egyptians gazed upon, twinkle with a gentle, reassuring light. Feel the quiet hush descending, a soft blanket of peace after our journey through the bustling ancient world. All the grand temples, the tireless farmers, the wise scribes, they now recede into the gentle mist of memory. Let the images drift, softly, like sand sifting through time. Your mind can let go of the details, of the heat of the sun, and the taste of ancient beer. Just feel the calm, the deep, abiding quiet. There's nothing more to do, nowhere else to be. Simply allow the quiet to deepen. Let every muscle in your body relax, sinking deeper into your bed. The long, winding river of history has brought us to this tranquil moment. All is still, all is peaceful, and now, as the final whispers of ancient Egypt fade into the softest of sighs, may your own dreams be as calm and deep as the timeless Nile itself. Sweet dreams.